Hi, and welcome to episode number 68 of Dreamers and Doers, where I interview people who follow their passion and use it to make the world better. And I think that's you, Nicole Gibson, which welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex.
And so I'm really interested to have you because you started this movement called Love Out Loud. I saw you have online programs, you have retreats, what's your TED Talk too, and it's all about really spreading love. So before we dive into this, I'm always interested in my guest story and what led you to what you're doing now. So can you expand a bit on that?
Yes, I always feel like this is such a big question. It's like, what led you to what I'm doing now is like a whole succession of life events, you know? I think finding your purpose often means going the long way. And I definitely feel like I've had experiences of that in my own journey. You know, I ran a mental health charity for 8 years before I founded Love Out Loud, which I founded after a personal experience as a teenager going through an eating disorder. And with that came pretty intense periods of depression and anxiety as well. And just realizing in that experience that people were so afraid to have that conversation with me. People were so afraid to lean into the discomfort of the vulnerability I was experiencing. And yet I had all of this clinical support by the time of intervention, and I didn't really feel like I was getting better because the community around me weren't really seeing the human being in me. And for a long time, I thought that was because they didn't care. And then as I started to see more clearly, I started to realize, well, actually they did care. They just didn't know how. They didn't know how to have that hard conversation with me. They didn't know how to feel comfortable in the vulnerability. And when I started my first organization, which was called the Rogan Rouge Foundation, I was very inspired to champion mental health from a community perspective and to look at what responsibility do we have as a friend? What responsibility do we have as a partner? What responsibility do we have as a parent, as a teacher, as a stranger, you know, walking past someone in the street? Do these things actually matter? Well, my answer was always yes, that they're the things that matter the most. And that led me on a huge adventure through hundreds of communities around Australia, overseas, really listening to stories. Like one of the biggest things for me was this like insatiable curiosity. I didn't want to have the answer. I wanted to hear people's stories and I wanted to hear it from them. You know, what is it that you need when you're feeling most vulnerable? What is it that you need to feel well in yourself as a person and to feel like you belong and to feel like you're enough? And these conversations and these workshops and these presentations that I was running over the first few years of doing this work really took me to so many diverse places. And what it made me realize was, you know, I think sometimes we think that if you're from a lower socioeconomic background, your needs are going to be different to if you're from a higher socioeconomic background, or if you are Australian or you're not Australian, or if you're male or you're female, if you're gay or if you're straight, like all of these things. And what I realized through this work is actually our differences are just nothing compared to the sameness in us as a human being, and the needs that we all have that unify every single one of us. There's this universal thing, which is our humanity, and that is in everyone. And the more I did this work and started to see these like pretty amazing results in communities around mental health, I was asked to become a commissioner for the government, which is a long story in itself, but I'll give the short version, just because they started to see that these results were very effective, you know, a lot more effective than clinical interventions. And doing 4 years of that work in government, matched with 8 years in it's only coming, sorry. Matched with 8 years in community mental health, what I started to see was, wow, like we can tackle it from the bureaucratic perspective, and we can focus just on mental health, but actually there's something much bigger at play here. And this is that mental health is a symptom of a much deeper challenge that we're facing as humanity. It's a much, much deeper challenge and these experiences of anxiety and depression and stress, actually these are symptoms that we're experiencing. It's a symptom. So how do we get to the root cause? And after 8 years doing that work, I just realized, fuck, we overcomplicate it. Like the answer is actually just love. We need to know how to be present with each other. We need to know how to love ourselves, and we need to know what it actually means to love another person and to lean into another person, and to realize that by leaning into someone else's pain and vulnerability isn't actually a sacrifice to us, and it's not because we don't want to, it's because we don't know how to. And when I saw that, I realized something really profound, and that's what led me to write the book Love Out Loud. And from the book, it became a movement with a vision to impact 4% of the world's population, or 350 million people, in the message of love, because that's deemed to be a tipping point. So a point of critical mass. If we engage that many people in love, supposedly in physics, the rest of a population shift. And that's my dream for humanity, that has been sort of uncovered through working with hundreds of thousands of people over the past decade. I just want people to realize that loving each other is so easy. It's such an easy thing to do. And we've overcomplicated it. And we've been told that it needs to be hard, and that life needs to be hard, and we need to watch our back, and that people are selfish. These are stories that we've been raised with. I remember getting told as a kid, no good deed goes unpunished. Like, these are the kind of stories that we get told as children that block us from our humanity and make us feel like we don't belong in the world. So that's really where Love Out Loud's vision came from.
Yeah, so really recreating that trust in a way in our society.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about, like, first having, like, you talk about the tools to love better in a way, and but also to me it was about having that awareness that this is a problem in the first place. Like, I started here in Bondi Beach going to a circle called One Way, which is all about mental health. And I remember before going there, I wasn't really thinking about any of this and how disconnected we are. I'm from Paris, and you see thousands of people as you go to work, but you don't look at them in the eyes, and you don't feel that disconnect. So like, what made you be more aware that there was that disconnect, and how do you feel like people could become more aware of it, like awaken to the fact that it doesn't have to be like this?
It's a great question. So I'll answer it in two parts. How did I awaken to this, and how do other people become aware? For me, I guess because I was experiencing such a critical position in my own health, right? That I was experiencing what it felt like to be the elephant in the room all the time. So because I looked physically unwell because my weight was 20 kilos underweight, it's quite a confronting thing to look at, especially for people in my life that had seen me drastically lose this weight. I saw how difficult it is for people to be around someone that is in vulnerability and pain. So I really understood that there's like a mechanism that so many people are experiencing, which is just like, we put a wall up and we want to push it away because we're not ready to confront it ourselves. It's really no different to watching the news and seeing the fact that there are wars in our world and murders that happen and governments that are corrupt and feeling nothing. Like, that's not actually normal. It's not normal to feel nothing when you see that happening in the world. But it's become normal because we've been surrounded by it so much that the only way to protect ourselves in that is by putting a wall up and not feeling. So we're numbing our feeling. We're not being present with our feeling. And that's coupled with, a bunch of different vices that I think many people in the Western world experience, whether that be, 3 or 4 beers every night, whether that be cigarettes, whether that be recreational drug use, like whether that be loads of sex, whether that's like trying to find validation on your Tinder, like whatever it is. There's so many different versions of this, getting lost in the vortex of Instagram and Facebook or YouTube for hours on end, Netflix. Like, these are not signs of a healthy human being. These are signs of a human being that's trying to escape the present moment and escape the pain of what it feels like to actually be connected to themselves and to each other. And this is something that we've normalized in our culture. So I think this is how other people can start to understand, oh, wow, actually, maybe there is something up. Maybe there's something that's driving me to want to write myself off 3 days a week. Maybe there's something that's driving me to spend 5 hours a day on social media, and to start to question these things. Why can't I hold down a steady relationship whilst they're on a date and going to the bathroom and checking what else is available on Tinder? Like, this is how people are living rather than actually being present with one another and realizing, wow, there's so much more richness when I seek connection. And this is actually what my soul truly needs, because we're all craving acknowledgement, right? We all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. This is something that my work has shown me so much. We just want to be seen and heard. But we're never going to fully feel seen and heard if the way that we're seeking this is through validation. It's only ever going to be surface level. So how do we search deeper? Well, this is something that I see as a skill that we can learn. And it's a skill in self-awareness. It's a skill in emotional intelligence. And it's a practice of actually being willing to be uncomfortable. Because when you first start to come back into your body and to be present and to feel, it's probably going to feel really uncomfortable. You're probably going to run away. You want to run away. You're going to have these impulses to go back into like destructive or addictive behaviors. So you need to be willing to kind of ride that wave, just like you need to be willing when you're gaining fitness at the gym to be uncomfortable for a period of time before it starts to get easier. It's no different to that.
And concretely, what are the tools you use or recommend for more presence?
This is an awesome question. Presence begins with understanding what's taking you away from presence. I think this is like the number one, the first part of your process. What is actually taking me away from the present moment? So figuring out what your vices are, figuring out what types of conversations and what emotions that when you're feeling and you're having are making you check out. So that, like, for me, I used to have really intense symptoms of disassociation around particular types of energies and emotions. So if someone was aggressive towards me or raised their voice, like, I would immediately check out. It's not something that I could be present with because I felt unsafe in that. Yeah. So I think for many men that I've seen and worked with, feeling sadness or feeling vulnerability or feeling like insecurity, for so many men, culturally, it hasn't been okay. So what do you think that means? Is like, I'm going to check the fuck out and I'm not going to feel this. I'm going to revert to anger. I'm going to be violent. I'm going to drink myself into a stupor just to not feel so that I am okay. Like, so it's the awareness is the first thing. And then the practice isn't complex, but it's hard. It's simple, but it's difficult. Yeah. And the practice is in the moment, having enough awareness to catch yourself when you are about to feel something and then your impulse is to check out of that feeling. The practice is to stay with the feeling. Whatever your impulse is telling you to do, whether that's to go and smoke a cigarette, walk away, whatever, the practice is to know, I'm going to choose to be here and I'm going to be in the discomfort. And when you choose to be in the discomfort of that, it is no different to when you're doing a bicep curl. On the 15th rep, when your bicep starts to rip because there's enough resistance for your muscle to get stronger, when you stay in that discomfort, that's what you're doing with your self-awareness and your ability to be present.
And as a man who wants to be strong, I think that's the real strength, right? It's not to escape.
So much, right? Like, how powerful is it when you, I mean, I can only speak on behalf of, I guess, a female perspective, but when I see a man is able to just be fully present with emotions, whether that be theirs or mine or someone else's, like, to me, that is such a sign of masculinity. And I think that this narrative, which has told men, masculinity only looks like this, it's to be tough and it's to be violent and it's to be all of these things. It's like such a misconception. I think what that demonstrates is a man that is still a boy in so many ways. He hasn't actually matured into his healthy masculine and his adulthood.
That's so interesting. And completely agree on that. And it's been an interesting journey from a man's perspective. Actually, I think, yeah, when I go to the circles around mental health, there are a lot of men. I think the suicidal rate for men is way higher in countries, maybe especially in countries like Australia, where there's a bit of that culture where you want to be tough and you don't speak about the things that would make you look weak in a way. That's super
Totally. Like
interesting.
even when you were living in France, like, did you notice? I know I grew up in Europe as well. Men are so much more affectionate with each other. Like they're not. It's not a strange thing to be able for a man to give a man a hug and to express openly. And there's more body language. There's more expression. Where in Australia, like the men are so rigid so often.
And about the tools, like. I'm 100% aligned there. Is like catching yourself is probably and sitting with it is such a great technique. But like for someone who listens to that and who's going to maybe forget about it, do you have practices, more like routines that to train your mind? I know for me, for example, meditation twice a day was like a good training for my mind, just to have that perspective. And then the reminder to breathe slowly when this arises. Do you have maybe these kind of routines that you feel help actually do it in the moment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the way that I've trained myself and what I've written into Love Out Loud is very much a unique way that I've discovered through working with so many people. But I will preface this by saying I think meditation is an amazing tool, like sitting with yourself in silence for a period of time, whether that be like 10 minutes or an hour, is incredibly valuable, because what you're doing is giving yourself a space to actually notice what is actually present for you, rather than just being in the reactionary like reality of life when you aren't in meditation and there's a million things trying to take you away. But for me, the frame that I've written into Love Out Loud, really, if I was to bring it all back, it comes down to understanding that in every single moment, we're either choosing love or we're choosing fear. Otherwise put, we're either open or we're closed. We're either leaning in or we're tapping out. Where, zeros or ones. If you were to go to like a binary like version of this, open or closed, zeros and ones, or ones and zeros. And a practice that has massively helped me, and I've written this into Love Out Loud as well, was actually deconstructing how fear plays out in characteristics and behaviors for me. So what I started to notice was fear it felt restrictive, it felt contracted, it felt self-oriented, it was exclusive. Meaning that it was separating me from other people in my decision making and my frame of thinking. It resulted in deeper feelings of anxiety. It meant that I couldn't be so altruistic or positive in my thinking, whereas love was the opposite. It was inclusive, it was creative, it was free, it was surrendered, it was open, it was kind. These kind of nuances that I started to notice in those differences between fear and love. And when I actually documented that, and you can do this in your own life, like document when I'm in a state of fear, what is actually present for me. So noticing, are you feeling, when you're afraid to ask someone's number at a bar, what is happening to you in your body? What is happening to you in your mind? Like, is your mind starting to go to all of the worst case scenarios? Are you starting to think of all of the possible things that could go wrong? Is your heart beating faster? Are your palms sweating? Are you feeling sick in the stomach? Like, are you feeling contracted? Notice these things, and then notice as well what happens when you're in a receptive state and you're in an open state. And when you document this, it's like you have this checklist all of a sudden that when you show up in life, you can actually see it as I started to see it like a game, literally like a video game that I was in. Like, how do I choose love? Like, what would love do? What choice can I make in this moment that's going to align me to love, that's going to make me feel? So I'm going with my feeling, all of these things that I now realize is actually in the direction of love. So spending the time journaling this, spending the time like actually deconstructing how this shows up for you. Like, what I've noticed in my work is so many people feel things that they don't even realize they're feeling because they haven't actually spent time in their bodies. Like, how is your body actually feeling? Because your head's going to have one thing to say, but your body's going to have this whole other thing to say. And what actually feels good for you, what actually makes you feel expansive, like, this is really important awareness for us to all realize. And I think this is a way to actually make it tangible for people. So if you're listening and you want like something tangible that you can practice, and you struggle to sit in silence and meditate, this is something that's really like active. You can be active in this in your life every day, every moment.
That's so interesting. And yeah, what you talked about looking at what's happening with the fear. For example, when you ask for that number at the bus stop, it makes me think of a practice I'm doing in Bali that gave me so much awareness into the fear in entering my relationship, which is contact ecstatic dance. So basically, there's, you know,
I know
there's music and there's people, and you're meant to, if you want to, you can dance alone, or you can go and dance with people, and it's all like a free flow in a way. And I found it really interesting because, well, first I have a good time when I do it, but it's also confronting in a way, because it's like a mirror of my thoughts. So let's say there will be that really beautiful and attractive woman to me in that space, and maybe I would avoid it because I want to feel safe and go for a woman that I'm not interested in. So but then I see the fear of rejection as I do it, or maybe dancing with a man and not being sure. Like it raises all these kind of fears, which are interesting. So good practice for the people who want to see what's in the inner world when they come into contact with other people through energy and flow. But and so going on around this more, because we talked a bit about sitting with the fear, the relationship with ourselves, but also in the relationships with others, and having because we live with other people, and creating like more love in our relationships.
Actually, there's one other thing that I think would be very helpful as well in this noticing is notice where your defenses start to rise up. Defense is like a very big indication into something that you're not comfortable with, that you're not willing to be present with. And pretty much under all defense is shame, right? That you feel ashamed about something. There's something in you that you're rejecting. So defense, because we don't really talk about defenses, right? We usually just react to defense. Like if someone defends, we think that they're a dickhead, and that's kind of as far as it goes. But actually, like, defense is hugely useful in helping us become more self-aware and look at what parts of ourselves we're not comfortable with yet. And also, like, to give you insight into your relationships, when the relationships in your life, when they come up against you with defense, what if you would actually see that compassionately and realize, oh wow, I'm seeing something, or I'm poking something in this person right now that they, have not accepted in themselves, that they feel insecure about, that they feel ashamed about. And actually that part of them needs a lot of love. It doesn't need me to attack. It needs me to love and understand, and also vice versa, to have that relationship with ourselves. So defense is a really powerful insight to help us realize, okay, this is what I'm not actually, being with in myself, truly being with. Because as soon as we defend, we like push it away. We're like, I don't want you to see that. I don't want that to be seen.
Well, actually, that's a really interesting question regarding defense, because do you feel that that defensive approach and the defense and those barriers in certain way can be quite justified in certain environment? I know for me, for example, when I'm in Bali or here in Bondi, I create love bubbles, and for me it's way easier to go and hug people and to be my own self. But I also know in some environments I feel less comfortable, and even it makes me think of there's something that I call the super hot chick syndrome, which is I see a lot of women who are really beautiful. Well, you can see they have these defenses, and the thing is, there's a reason for it. It's because, especially if they're in a more toxic masculine environment where all the men want to get something from you, where you kind of have to have these defenses. So my question would be, So that's more a more extreme case maybe. But my question would be in general, like, do you feel you want to be open like all the time and kind of show the light even in those environments that are probably harder to navigate? Or do you feel you have to have this defense in some environments?
That's a really powerful question. Definitely, I think defense is the way when you don't have a higher ability to hold your vibration, to protect yourself. I think the level beyond needing to use defense to keep the world out is to be so confident in being able to assert your boundaries. It's the difference between getting the super hot chick, right? Getting really defensive when a man comes close to her who might just be wanting to genuinely ask how her day is. It's the difference between her getting defensive and being like, I'm not even interested, and not even giving him a chance, versus, hey, I just want you to know that I feel in this environment, there's a lot of people that want something from me. And I just want you to know that I'm just here to find a friend, and that's it. And to have that conversation clearly and to state the boundary from the outset means that all of the defenses can come down because there's clarity, And I think it takes a lot of self-assurance, and it takes a lot of confidence, and it takes a lot of inner strength to be able to do that. But I think that is like the, for lack of a better description, maybe the more evolved way of navigating that situation, rather than just jumping straight into defense. Because as soon as someone's in defense, 99% of the time, everyone else will go into attack, because there's an animal in us as a human being. And like what happens when you attack an animal, it defends itself. And we're not actually different to that. We like to think we're different from that, but there's an instinct in us as humans, because we are animals and we have an animal body, that is going to defend when we feel attacked, and it's going to attack when we feel like someone's defending.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I was reflecting on how when I was caring more about the opinion of other people, I was attracting more criticism, and I feel it's the same. But I completely vibe with, that's kind of where I got at. It's like, if I have the energy, if I'm fully empowered, I'm like, yeah, let's get in a confronting environment, and that's the test. But there are sometimes when I'm not, and that's when I feel like I want to protect myself in a way, because my energy is not there. I'm still trying to find that balance between like surrounding myself with like-minded, positive, supportive people, and at the same time getting a little bit of that, challenge and kind of what some people call the real world.
Yeah, I think as well, like the people that love you most aren't always the ones that are just like supportive of everything. Often the ones that love us most are the ones that are prepared to challenge us. But it can be done in a way that's loving. It doesn't have to be in a way that's aggressive or unsafe. We can learn to challenge each other in a way that's actually helpful and conducive, and to learn to trust each other enough to welcome that feedback. I think that's really powerful in relationships when we can develop that.
Nice. Also, a quick question, very practical, so you talked about your past in mental health, and about the fact that the people around, it's not really that they don't want to help, but they don't know how. Do you have simple tips for people who have someone around them that can be in a depression or have some mental health issue? Like sometimes it's very disempowering for the people around. They want to help, but they really don't know how. So what would be good advice there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, well, the most important thing to look at here is, often we get caught up in the fear of saying the wrong thing. We get caught up that we're not the right person to be having the conversation. We actually get afraid in that moment of rejection as well. When the other person is vulnerable, and like by leaning into that, there's also a level of vulnerability in being the one that's wanting to support. When you feel like maybe the other person will defend themselves or attack you for that, there's a fear of rejection that comes up in that too. It's really important to remember a couple of things. The first is, it's really not about saying the perfect thing. It's not about what you say. It's about the love and the intention of actually leaning in and reaching out. And what we don't realize is, by thinking things like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I'm not the right person? In this moment where someone we love needs us so much, by having that inner dialogue, we're actually making it about ourselves. We're putting ourselves as the most important part in that. We're like, what if I do the wrong thing? What if I say the wrong thing? Rather than realizing in that moment, it actually isn't about you. It's about leaning into someone who really is in need of our support and our love, and to make it less about you. And that actually helps with finding the confidence, finding the courage, like when I started speaking on stage, how did I find the courage to do that? Well, I didn't feel like I was enough for that, especially when I had no experience, but I felt like my mission was deserving of me finding the courage. So the less I made it about me, the more I was able to do that. And I think that's the case in these situations as well. The less we make it about ourselves, the easier it is to lean into that. And the other thing to remember in this is, it's not actually about it's not about having the answers. Like, often the best advice literally is no advice. And we forget this. We think that when we see someone that we love who's suffering, we're going to need to have all of the answers. But 99% of the time, people don't want us to have the answers. It's actually not even something that they want. They don't want us to go into that conversation with all of the advice, all of the solutions. If a boyfriend's ever tried to have a conversation with his girlfriend, he will probably know what I'm talking about. A lot of the time, like, when people are in their vulnerability, they don't actually want you to have the answer. What they want you to do is ask them, because everyone has the answer for themselves. Like, from my experience, most people know what they need, but not many people are actually asking them what they need. So approaching the conversation by acknowledging that you see them, by saying, hey, I've really noticed that you're not yourself lately. And I just want you to know that I love and care about you so much. And I see you and I hear you, and I don't know what to do. I feel vulnerable in this, but I want to ask you if there's anything that I can do to support you right now, or, what's one thing I can do that's going to help you get through this period of sadness or grief. And when we approach that conversation in this way, rather than, I think you need to do this, and this is what I think you need, and this is who I think you are. It's like, when someone's already in pain, of course they're going to push against that, because the last thing we need when we're in pain is to be told who we are, and it's not helpful. But when we can approach it the other way, it makes it a lot easier to receive and to feel safe for the other person.
Yeah, that resonates with my very rational mind, like, oh yeah, problem solution versus probably holding space, right?
Yeah, that's right. We don't always need to know the answers.
And you talked about not making it too much about you, which I thought was really good, and talk about both in this situation but also in business, which is a good segue, because I'm very I admire a lot how you put together also a business around what you love, which is promoting love. And I want to ask you, how do you feel about creating businesses around doing what you love and around promoting things that are like kind of very ethical in a way? Because like, I know some people, when you start monetizing your passion or things that are good for the world, they can, I don't know if you've had criticism around this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is unavoidable, to not experience some level of criticism in a culture like Australia's. But I think for the most part, with Love Out Loud, I've experienced support. Yeah. I think the most important thing to remember is the objective of any business is to solve a problem. Like, we forget this in all of the complex messaging around business and entrepreneurship and scaling and startups and all of this stuff. We forget, actually, business is quite simple. It's about solving a problem and doing it in one of the most effective ways and creating value for the people that you're trying to solve the problem for. Now, when you translate that to Love Out Loud, the problem that we're solving is a problem that's extremely universal for people. You know, like, who doesn't want to overcome fear? Who doesn't want to learn to love themselves more? Not everyone realizes that they want this, but when it's put to them and they become aware of themselves through the messaging that we give out as a movement, as an organization, most people are like, yeah, wow, actually, I do want to love myself more. I do want to know how to overcome my insecurities. I do want to know how to, overcome my fears. So I guess I've always very much believed in the value that we're giving to the people who engage in our services and our events, who read the book. That's never been a problem. And it was also very organic, because I created Love Out Loud because I saw the need so much. And I think where a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong is they think this is what I think people need, and they don't actually consult the people that they're trying to engage. And a lot of the time, like, we have biases as founders, as entrepreneurs, and we have attachment to what it is we're trying to do. So I've always really tried to build Love Out Loud in a way that is tribe-centric. So really engaging the community and asking the community, what is the most helpful way for you to engage in learning about self-love? What is it that you want us to create? What is it that you want us to do? So it's all been very grassroots and community-driven, because that's, I guess, who I am in my heart. I'm a big believer in grassroots. I think it's really the ultimate form of change, because it's sustainable and it's foundational and it's grounded and it's integrated into culture, which is my biggest passion, is shifting culture, challenging culture. And it's something that I think every entrepreneur should look at their own version of this, whether or not you're like trying to promote love, or you're like manufacturing office chairs. Rather than thinking like, what do you think people who are working in offices need? Why don't you actually go and talk to people who are sitting on the different chairs for 8 hours a day, and actually asking them what they would love, because then you're going to be able to create a product that's relevant, that is solving a problem for people, that is valuable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one, because I also feel like when I started doing programs on, for example, meditation or time management and spending less time on your smartphone, I found that actually the people who needed it the most were probably not the one asking for it, which was a little bit tricky, I found. I mean, even when you listen to, Steve Jobs and some entrepreneurs, it's about also like, they weren't very famous for asking people what they wanted, but more for being delivering what people needed,
what they saw,
without them asking. But
yeah,
I mean, it to be tricky.
If you're identifying, okay, I have something that I'm wanting to create, and the people that need it most are not necessarily identifying that, I think it comes down to your communication. So, what Apple has been very good at is communicating their products. They know how to articulate their product to their audience, and so the audience identify, yeah, actually I do need that. So when I say like making it relevant for the people you're trying to engage, it's as much about actually realizing, yeah, okay, I've identified a gap, I've identified a problem that really needs to be solved, and I want to clarify that with enough of my community to validate that this is not just my own bias, but is a real problem. And then it's about, okay, how do I communicate this in a way that's really effective? Like, that was really hard for me at the beginning of Love Out Loud, trying to figure out how I communicate like love to people is like is highly abstract, right? It's a very conceptual thing. And it took a lot of work as well, because this is the philosophy that I see, that I live my life by. And it was very intuitive for me. So to break it down into like simply, easily accessible steps for people that actually made sense and were tangible and were practical was a huge process of like distilling a lot of thinking and a lot of like processing.
Nice. Yeah, that's definitely sounds challenging. Put love into books and online programs. But yeah, thanks for doing that. And I think it's great to have businesses who are aligned with the greater good in general. And I find it, for me, I'm kind of really pushing in a way for, I don't know if it's me creating this, but I feel people have a bit of judgment around monetizing things that are good for the world sometimes. Um, you know, the biggest example for this would be maybe Tony Robbins. Like when I went to Tony Robbins, I had a lot of people thinking, oh, I really don't vibe with the fact that he makes a lot of money doing what he's doing. And I was like, well, you know, if he's going to do good and he's promoting a message he believes in, he might as well make a lot of money. So he would promote it to more people, which makes sense logically. But I know even for me at the beginning, I wasn't very comfortable with you know, making a lot of money doing good. So I think that's I mean, for me, that's like something I wanted to rewire for me and also for society in general, like having people wanting to make a lot of money doing something good, because that's how they can, one of the ways they can scale their impact too, right? Is that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to this like cultural story that we've been told from school that it has to be hard, you know, like there's this attitude that it has to be hard and it has to be something you hate. And if you're not sitting in class hating it, like you're a weirdo, you're a geek, you're like an outcast, you know. Like it's more normal to hear people complain about their job than to hear people celebrate their job and love their job and talk highly, you know, about what it is they do. So this is really a cultural attitude more than anything. And I completely agree with you that it has to be challenged, because when you look at the world as it stands, we need social entrepreneurs who are doing good in the world to start to override our economy, in comparison to like the Coca-Colas, you know, like it's very important for the sustainability of our planet that organizations that have found out how to build a business that is sustainable and scalable, but is also doing good for humanity in the world. It's very important that they start to lead our economy.
Yeah. Actually, you'll be a speaker in March at an event I'm going to for the Freedom Collective, and like kind of one of our purpose is to shift the money energy. We say more good money in more good hands, you know, to shift that energy, which I think is needed in a way. So I have a question around what would be the best advice you'd give to someone who has a passion and wants to build their life around it. So probably in the world we live in, monetizing it and also maybe structuring it like, okay, I love this, I'm passionate about that. How do I create my life around it? Where would
My
you
advice
start?
to someone? Oh man, belief. Where would I start? Believe. You've got to believe. If there's a part of you that doesn't believe, there's no point even beginning. Like if 99% of you believes and 1% of you doesn't believe, don't start. Like you've got to wait till you believe 100% it's possible, because until you believe it's possible, you will be looking for every like reason and element of validation to derail you. So when you find that like that deep belief that your dream is possible, which it is, I promise you that it is, you would not be dreaming it unless it was possible. That is like the power of being human, that we can actualize our dreams. Like that is what is so fucking amazing about being a human being, is we can bring our dreams to life. We have the ability. You don't dream something, you don't see something in your mind, you don't feel something in your heart if you don't have the ability to actualize it. So I promise you it's possible. But you need to get to a point where you believe deeply that it's possible, because when you believe it's possible, the difference is you commence your journey proceeding as if success is inevitable. So all of a sudden the potholes and the what maybe were seen as setbacks become opportunities for growth. They become challenges. They become the things that are strengthening you to become the condition of your dream. Like you start to see everything differently when you believe 100% that what you're setting out to do is possible. And it's that grit, it's that tenacity, it's that resilience or anti-fragility. It's that faith that's going to get you through the times where it just feels so hard and you're being so tested and the world's up against you and you're under the grill, and you're getting negative feedback and you're feeling socially isolated and you're sacrificing all of these things that your friends want you to do so that you can build your dream. Like, what's going to get you through those moments is knowing that it's possible, knowing that it is just a matter of time and a matter of effort and a matter of, hard work, or, at least inspired work before you get there. And when you proceed like that, like, I can't say that there's an effortless way to achieve your dreams, but there's a way of framing it that is a lot more conducive for like sanity and
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's when perspective comes into play too, because like, in a way, it doesn't have to be hard, but from like usual perspective, it is going to be a bit hard. Then it's about framing it. Like, sometimes I'm like, oh, it's hard. And then I'm like, well, with perspective, it's not hard. It's just like challenges that are fun, and, you can reframe them. But I almost feel like, we can make it like not hard, but at least for me, it takes a little bit of working on myself and on perspective to have that, that perspective to be like, okay, what you call hard is like, okay, someone's making fun of you on social media that you don't know. You can call it hard, but people used to go to war and stuff. Like, is it that
exactly
hard? But we consider it as hard. Usually, I get a lot of people who tell me what I'm doing is very brave, and then I'm like, it feels like it sometimes, but with perspective, it's not really.
That's an awesome perspective. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, perspective is everything. When you can find perspective for yourself, everything becomes achievable. There's a quote that I love so much, and it's most people's problems are that their problems aren't big enough.
Gotta
really
ponder
like
over that one. Just one last thing then, because you talked about believing 100%. But do you feel you need to find something and automatically it's your thing and you believe in it in 100%? Or did you use things around visualization, or was it a process for you to be like, kind of my higher self believes in it, but my smaller self needs to do like visualization or use the law of attraction or whatever exercises to be really believing 100% all of the time?
I feel like that question could be like a whole podcast in itself.
In 2 minutes.
I have, I guess, a little bit of a different view around vision and purpose as well. I don't believe that we have to construct a vision or construct a purpose. Like, it's not just about being like, oh, well, I think speaking's really cool, so that's my vision now. I actually think it's about uncovering, like it's about undoing rather than like constructing. You've got to unravel the layers of your identity and every aspect of yourself that's like, I should do this. I think that's cool. I would look great doing that. What would people think if I achieved in this way? Like, all of the ego constructs, you need to get the fuck out of that, like, and actually be fully humble and reverent. Like, when I left school at 14 to pursue acting, that was my dream. My constructed dream was acting. And the universe just came with like a baseball bat time after time after time and knocked me to my knees until I surrendered. And when I fully surrendered, then I saw what my truth really was and what I was here to do. So I think when you find that truth, which can only be found in like total surrender and complete humility away from your ego, then because there's nothing left of you, it's like, I have nothing to lose anymore. Like, this is it. And like, through those experiences, I did believe because I saw the truth.
Okay, that'll be for our next podcast then. That would be an interesting chapter. Because actually, for me, what the universe tells me is kind of like, hey, mate, that's a co-creation. You're also God. So yes, like, I'm going to give you signs and show you around, but it's also for you to decide and be like, okay, I create my reality. And so anyway, that'd be interesting. It's like, well,
yogis, yogis have different approaches in how they seek enlightenment, right? So I would say in the yogi frame, my path is devotion. So I devote myself to love and surrender to love again and again and again and again. And it's through that devotion that I find self-actualization. But there are some yogis that have a very opposite view. So, I guess it's what works for you.
And again, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's like probably that's more masculine, intentional way versus the more feminine surrender way, and they both work.
Yeah.
Figure it out. But that would be the beginning of a long chat. So that was so good. I love chatting with you, Nicole. And to finish with, I'd love to ask you, what's next for you? How can people follow you and know more about the next things you're going to do and be part of?
Thank you. Okay, so 2020 is Love Out Loud's year to reach critical mass. So we need you. If you're listening to this podcast, we need you to become a Love Out Louder and to understand more about this movement and why it's important that we spread this message of love into the new decade. We run events all over the world. If you're listening in Australia, we have facilitator training, which is for people that want to actually learn the Love Out Loud methodology and learn to facilitate that in their workplace, in their community, bring it into their art. We have a real diversity of people that do that. We run retreats. Our next one in Australia is near Byron Bay in June. So please come along to that. We also run retreats in Italy, in New Zealand, in Bali. We will be running one in LA, and we run trainings all over the world too. So if you're listening internationally, probably the easiest way to look at our events for 2020 is to go to love-outloud.com. You can also follow Love Out Loud on socials. You can follow me on socials. My Instagram handles Nick Gibson, NIC Gibson _ or Nicole Gibson on Facebook. All of the information will be there. If you want to read the book, you can buy that on the website as well. There's going to be an Audible out by the time you're listening to this, so look out for that. The book's called Love Out Loud, and we give the first 10 videos of our online course away for free at loveoutloud.online.
Nice. Jump on it. And you told me you'd be in Sydney, so we might co-create an event. We'll see. I'll follow up on that. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much to the people who listened to. Do you have a last word for our listeners, Nicole?
Just thank you, Alex. Thank you for creating this space. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. And to your beautiful listeners, keep choosing love.
Beautiful. Tradition is we finish with a hug, even on the on this call. The hearts connect. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone.